Sink the tax! Leave no leaves!
Winter, 1773, Boston Harbor. Colonists disguised as Mohawk Indians execute a daring act of defiance. They swiftly hurl hundreds of chests filled with valuable tea leaves into the unforgiving sea as a bold protest against unjust taxation and a striking display of economic resistance against the British Crown. Welcome to Economic Rhapsody, the channel that discovers history to understand the future. And today, we're going to explore the economic components of the most famous party in the history of America, the Boston Tea Party. So make sure to subscribe and let's get started. As we step back into the pages of history, it's crucial to understand the colonial backdrop that set the stage for the Boston Tea Party. The American colonies had a complex relationship with Britain, their mother country. These colonies were a source of valuable resources and trade, contributing to the growth of the British Empire. However, as time went on, tensions brewed over issues of taxation and representation. The American colonists began to feel the weight of economic challenges and restrictions imposed upon them by the British Crown that was obsessed with reminding everyone who is the real ruler. Needless to say that they were also looking for creative ways to fund their expensive hobby of starting wars on any spot on Earth. One significant factor that intensified these tensions was the Navigation Acts. Enacted by Britain, these laws were designed to regulate colonial trade and ensure that most of it benefited the British economy. While these acts initially sought to control smuggling and bolster the British shipping industry, they eventually limited the colonies' economic potential by constraining their ability to trade freely with other nations, especially with other European powers which were seen as a threat to British dominance. The imposition of taxes further fueled the growing resentment among the colonists. The Stamp Act of 1765, for instance, required various printed materials to bear a revenue stamp, effectively taxing everything from legal documents through newspapers and up to a 7-year-old child's ugly drawing. This act was met with fierce opposition from the colonists, who argued that they were being taxed without their consent, violating their rights as British subjects. These sentiments gave rise to the famous rallying cry, "No taxation without representation." But it wasn't just the Stamp Act. The British Crown continued to levy taxes on various goods, including tea. The Tea Act of 1773, a seemingly innocent piece of legislation, granted the British East India Company a monopoly on the export of tea to the American colonies. In a completely random coincidence, the company faced some financial difficulties those days and also had an unusually high surplus of tea stock. So everyone was happy and celebrated this win-win situation. Well, maybe they didn't. Anyway, this act meant that colonists had to purchase tea from this company only. And actually even at a lower price, as Britain reduced the taxes on tea import as part of the Tea Act. But in this carrot and stick game, the stick was much longer. Despite the lower price for the consumers, the Tea Act forbade local colonist traders to trade tea and damaged their businesses by preventing competition in the most corrupt way. The colonists didn't fall into the tax reduction trap and saw it more as a cynical bribe try. It was like the last tea bag that broke the teapot's back. After all, the American settlers were still British, and if there is something that British people oddly like more than anything, is their 5 o'clock cup of tea. This act of economic favoritism further upset the colonists, who saw it as an attempt to manipulate their trade and stifle their economic freedom. The British East India Company was a powerful company that traded with India and East Asia. It was granted a monopoly by the British Crown in 1600. The company traded spices, tea, silk, cotton, and even opium. The company was a major source of revenue for the British government and helped expand the British Empire. However, it was criticized for its monopoly power and exploitation of India, and following internal political pressure combined with financial problems and uprisings in India, it was officially dissolved by the British government in 1874. So the seeds of discontent were sown, and the fuse was lit. The colonists, determined to stand up against economic oppression, were on the brink of making history. The stage was set for the event that would forever be known as the Boston Tea Party, a watershed moment in the journey toward American independence. So the outrage over the Tea Act was palpable among the colonists. They saw it as another instance of being discriminated against and regulated without any say in the matter, a blatant violation of their rights.
No taxation without representation.
This rallying cry was now echoed with even greater fervor. It's important to mention that despite the colonists' demand for representation, the colonies did have a few reserved seats in the British Parliament. However, their claims were due to the fact that the delegates they sent held relatively little power. The resistance spark, ignited by economic oppression, was not limited to crying and self-pity only. The colonists were ready to take a stand against the tyranny they perceived in British policies. The colonists didn't just voice their dissent, they took decisive action. In various colonies, a united stand was made to prevent the tea ships from unloading their controversial cargo. In Philadelphia and New York, the tea ships were sent back without discharging their load, a clear statement that the colonists wouldn't yield to the economic manipulations by the British government. At the heart of this resistance movement was the Sons of Liberty, a confidential organization formed to protect the rights of the colonists and fight against oppressive British policies. Led by influential figures like two of the United States founding fathers, Samuel Adams and John Hancock, the Sons of Liberty played a key role in coordinating these actions of defiance. Their secret meetings and strategies were instrumental in galvanizing the colonists to resist economic exploitation, laying the groundwork for more audacious actions. Samuel Adams once wrote,
"Among the natural rights of the colonists are these. First, a right to life, secondly to liberty, and thirdly to property, together with the right to defend them in the best manner they can."
Back to Boston Harbor, the night of December 16, 1773, when the most iconic act of defiance unfolded. A group of colonists, fueled by frustration and a deep sense of injustice, embarked on a mission that would forever etch their names into the annals of history. Disguised as Mohawk Indians to conceal their identities, they assembled at the Boston Harbor. With silence as their ally and determination as their guide, they set foot on 3 British tea ships, the Dartmouth, the Eleanor, and the Beaver. With practiced precision, they located the chests containing the prized cargo of tea leaves that represented all oppression acts made by the British Crown to gather economic inequality and the suppression of colonial rights. In a tough competition against time, the colonists brought the chests to the deck. With each move cloaked in secrecy, their minds resolute, and their hearts echoing with the words, "No taxation without representation." The cargo they were about to discard held immense value. 342 chests of Chinese black tea varieties that were imported by the notorious East India Company with an approximate value of 10,000 British pounds. You might not consider the loss of 10,000 pounds as a big deal, but in today's money, it equates to around $2 million, a serious amount of money, no doubt. As the colonists hurled chest after chest into the cold water, the harbor itself seemed to echo their defiance. The tea leaves, once a symbol of British dominance, now became an emblem of resistance. It was a demonstration of their unwavering commitment to their cause, as well as their readiness, in the name of principles, to make such a financial sacrifice, both to the British but also for themselves. Even cleaning up the water sounds very expensive to me. This act of protest wasn't just about the monetary value of the tea. It was a symbolic gesture, a proclamation that the colonists were willing to cast aside a relatively economic comfort for the sake of their rights and liberties. The echoes of the Boston Tea Party reached far beyond the shores of the harbor. Pictures from the party flooded the Instagram feed, and the news of this audacious act spread like wildfire. A renewed sense of unity was ignited among the American colonists. It was a resounding declaration that they would no longer tolerate economic oppression and unjust taxation. The Boston Tea Party was not merely a rebellion against tea taxes, it was a revolt against the economic and political stranglehold imposed by the British Crown. As the last chest of tea plunged into the harbor, the night air seemed to hold its breath, as if in anticipation of the seismic shift that this act would bring. The tea-laden waters bore witness to a moment that would be remembered as a turning point in history, a moment when economic resistance was elevated to the status of revolution. The colonists had sent a resounding message to the British government, one that was as clear as the moonlit night sky. The economic bonds that once held the colonies within the British Empire were now strained to the breaking point. The journey toward American independence had taken a decisive step forward, and the path ahead was one of uncertainty, courage, and a relentless pursuit of economic and political freedom. The British trading giant of the East India Company found itself grappling with the aftermath of the Boston Tea Party. As mentioned, the value of the destroyed cargo was very high and the company's already troubled financial situation just worsened. While the Treasury had anticipated nice returns from the tea monopoly, the Tea Party hermetically closed this revenue stream, hurting some of Britain's fiscal plans. In response, the British enacted a series of measures that would further stoke the flames of resentment and drive a deeper wedge between the colonies and the Crown. The Coercive Acts were not just mere legislative moves, they had profound economic consequences. One of the acts shut down the port of Boston, crippling its trade and commerce. Boston was to bear the brunt of the British response, but the impact was far-reaching. The Massachusetts Government Act also altered the colony's political landscape by placing the selection of the council in the hands of the Crown with an exclusive veto right, further eroding the colonists' ability to govern themselves. This punitive package of acts aimed to re-establish British control and economic dominance over the colonies, but it achieved the opposite effect. The economic hardship imposed by these measures intensified colonial unity and fueled the fervor for independence. The Coercive Acts only served to exacerbate tensions and push the colonies closer to the brink of rebellion. The colonies, united in their commitment to resisting economic oppression, responded to the Coercive Acts with a renewed spirit of cooperation. The First Continental Congress convened in 1774, bringing together delegates from 12 of the 13 colonies. During that Congress, the Continental Association was formed as a pact designed to resist British tyranny. It aimed to enforce a non-importation and non-exportation agreement on British goods. This wasn't just a mere boycott, it was an economic embargo that would send shockwaves through transatlantic trade. Oh, you probably wonder why was one colony missing in Congress? So it was Georgia, which was busy with the traditional British hobby of fighting and didn't want to upset the Crown that was happy as always to assist in their war against the native neighbors. The colonists were now determined to hit back where it hurt the most, the British economy. The Continental Association called for the cessation of imports and exports to and from Britain. This meant that the colonies would produce their own goods, foster local industries, and engage in trade among themselves. It was a daring move, not only politically but also economically. British goods became symbols of subjugation. Wearing British fabrics or sipping British tea was no longer a matter of preference, it was a statement of allegiance. As the boycott spread, homespun clothing and homemade products gained popularity, and the colonists reveled in their newfound economic independence. The boycotts negatively impacted British commerce, exports to the colonies plummeted, leaving British merchants and manufacturers grappling with dwindling markets. Industries that heavily relied on colonial trade, such as glass and steel, felt the sting of lost profits. However, the economic implications extended beyond the British shores. While the boycotts were a powerful weapon, they also brought about short-term hardships for the colonies themselves. The lack of British goods led to inflation of prices, and the absence of certain products tested the colonists' resolve. Yet, in the face of adversity, they persevered. The widespread boycotts and the Continental Association showcased the colonists' economic resilience, and as the boycotts continued, the colonists improved their ability to produce goods locally and found strength in economic self-reliance. This newfound economic empowerment fueled their broader quest for political independence, and eventually, 2 years later, it brought them to the Declaration of the Independence of the United States of America. Or the 13 United States to be more accurate. Needless to say that this declaration comes at a time of another grand war of Britain, the American Revolutionary War. That's it for now. The story of the Boston Tea Party, with the American colonies and their journey to independence, is undoubtedly much more complex than what a 15-minute video on an economic channel can capture. My goal was to emphasize the economic factors that prompted the American colonists to rebel and seek a definitive separation from Britain. I strongly believe that nearly every significant historical event has economic roots. Some are evident, as in this story, while others remain less visible. There might not be a more dominant factor shaping world history than economics. Maybe religion. In the aftermath of this story, the greatest nation of all time was born, one that grew bigger and more powerful than its mother country could have possibly imagined. But while the United States surged ahead, taking the lead in many aspects, the British held steadfast in their mastery of two beloved pursuits, tea consumption and the art of football. Yes, football. Not soccer as mistakenly pronounced by the American rebels. If you liked it, tell your friends. And if not, tell me. I invite you to subscribe, share, like, and mostly comment with your thoughts, ideas, fact corrections, and economic events from history that you'd like me to explore together with you. Economic Rhapsody. See you soon.